Paul Penley is back with us on the Gravity Commons podcast once again to talk about another chapter of his book, What Jesus Meant. Paul,
He
great to
by
have you.
far is the best looking guest we've had ever.
Yeah, Christy.
I'm
I
a
don't know.
little biased.
Yeah, I don't know if we should be. I mean, that's the nice thing about, I have a face for radio. That's what sometimes people say about me. But the nice thing about a podcast is that it really, you're not looking at faces unless you're watching this on YouTube. I suppose we do.
That's right. I'm looking at his face, so it's good.
I think like 6 people watch each episode on YouTube. So anyway,
yeah,
we don't have a high video production value. So
one of the most tricky compliments I ever received after I gave like a presentation at a chapel, and then afterwards, someone said, "With your voice, you should be a narrator." I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah,
yeah."
I received that.
Yeah, it's a good.
Like, we don't need to see you.
What went unsaid was, you got a voice, you got a face for radio. So,
well, all this to say, welcome, husband.
Hey, thanks.
Welcome again, Christy's husband. I will say, Paul, you're not a bad looking guy.
Thank you.
I'm trying to get on board. I'm trying to get on board with it. I mean, it's not a bad looking guy.
Oh man.
Anyway, if any of you, I mean, hopefully not too many of our listeners are looking this all up, but Christy and Paul they're kind of a good looking couple. So anyway,
shucks, thanks.
Yeah. All right, so we're talking this week about Jesus versus the Revolutionaries. We teed this up a little bit last time. Maybe you can give us just an overall. Give us an overall, like, what do you mean by Jesus? What do you mean by revolutionary? Who were these people? And, set this up in the context of the Gospels when, people start calling Jesus the Messiah. That had some freight. That term carried some freight that had to do with revolution. So give us a little background on that.
Absolutely. By the first century, when you hear the word Messiah, there had been centuries of discussion as to who that is, what they would do, attaching all sorts of expectations to it. And it wasn't monolithic. It wasn't like if you talk to 10 Jews on the streets of Jerusalem, they would all say the same thing. There were a few different camps that we can discover through some of the ancient literature. But it's really important to figure out, what were people thinking? What was in their mind, right? If you take the Gospel of Mark, 16 chapters, right in the middle of that gospel is basically the turning point, right? This whole gospel is basically Jesus demonstrating who he is without declaring it for the first half. And then right at the halfway point, he sits down with his disciples and he's like, "Who are people think I am?" And they're like, "Some prophet." And they're like, "Who do you say that I am?" And they're like, "Well," and then Peter, of course, steps up and is like, "You're the Messiah." Okay. This anointed one, this anointed king. And then what happens next? Jesus isn't just like, "Right, good, now you understand me. We can work with this. Like, let's go team. You know the plan." He immediately has to address not like their understanding of "good job, now you get me,"
right?
But he has to tackle their misunderstanding. And his exact next words are, "Hey, stop. The Son of Man, is now going to have to suffer, be rejected by all the cool kids who control things in Jerusalem, and ultimately die." And then, Peter's response to that is, "Oh, heck no.
Yeah, no thanks.
That's not how it's going to go. That is not the way this works. It is not the way this works. You're the Messiah, which means you're an anointed king, which means you're going to show up here. You're going to kick everyone's butt that we don't like. We're going to take back and rule an independent nation state. Once again, God's going to help us win." There was no difference between nationalistic ambition and prophetic promises of this coming one for most of the common Jews of the day. So he says Messiah, they think that, and Jesus has to say, actually, wrong paradigm. Mine is a path of suffering. It is not a path of kicking everyone's butt. It is not wiping out our enemies through death, violence, and then controlling things our way. So that's what's tricky, because Messiah in the first century, to many others that historians, Jewish historians like Josephus write about, they were guys who raided an arms depot, gathered weapons, slaughtered anyone who got in their way, and had a relentless ambition to become king. They were blood lustful and power hungry. And so Jesus had to separate himself from that and say, there's that path, which some people think. I'm following a quite minority view of suffering is going to be our path to redemption, not military victory.
We actually see this, I think, in today's culture. So I'm just going to get right to maybe a controversial question, but one of the sections in your book has the subtitle, Jesus's kingdom doesn't need political power to change the world. But there are a lot of mega Christians that believe he does. And so what do you mean? Like, what are you saying here?
Those words capture that interaction between Jesus and Pilate, where Pilate's just straight up asking him, like, are you trying to become king? Are you this kind of Messiah, the type that's gathered people together that then the Romans have to go in and kill? And Jesus has this enigmatic response where he doesn't say he's not king, but he says he's not the kind of king that everyone thinks of. And it's that famous line of, my kingdom, it's not of this world, it doesn't come from this place, it's not like the way kingdoms work here, because I don't rally people together and go kill others in order to establish it. He's like, so it's not this issue of violence and control and domination, where exerted power is the way I work over people, right? So it's in that exchange where he steps out of this idea of, I need political power in order to legislate and enforce a new moral agenda over the world for God's dream to come true here. So because of that just explicit way where he doesn't say, I'm for the empire. He doesn't say I'm of Rome. He doesn't say I'm against it and I'm on the team of the revolutionaries that want to attack and kill the local Roman garrison. He takes this path and says, like, I don't really fit in that game. Those rules I do not play by. I've got a different whole set of operating procedures in terms of how my kingdom functions. And so, yeah, he plainly says, I don't need political power to change the world. I have a strategy to change the world. It just looks different than the games that you guys keep playing, which really fits him into a long running Jewish kind of tension. Because originally the 12 tribes of Israel didn't have a king. And then there's a point, you can read about it in 1 Samuel 8, where they say, we want a king. And it's this interesting story. There's thematic repetition where the same line is used 3 different times over and over again in the story that says, appoint us a king so that we can be like all the other nations. Give us a king so we could be like all the other nations. And their main frustration was, we can't just go exert our will on other people. We want a king who will lead an army so that we can dominate. That's how we'll feel protected and established. And so there's this really sad moment where the nation of Israel, with God grieving and his prophet Samuel just frustrated by the whole event, choose to do something that God didn't want, which was to just function like all of the other nations, as opposed to being a special, differentiated type of community that would in fact refine the way things are done on earth.
Yeah. So, I think whenever we start talking about this, there's a lot of residual stuff I think that comes online for me, and I think for a lot of listeners, And some of that is like, how is this approach? So it's not violent revolution. Jesus isn't going to become a king like the other kings of the earth and enforce through domination and violence. God's kingdom is not going to come through domination and violence. How is then Jesus' posture different from what's frequently called like quietism, which is just sort of a like, hey, mind your own business, don't disrupt the gears of empire. So if there's things happening to our neighbors, right? They're being dragged out of their homes, for example. What is our responsibility? And there's one maybe our neighbors are being dragged out of their homes by government officials, taken off, having their rights violated, that kind of thing. There's one form of Christian engagement then would say, well, I don't know, just trust the government. It's fine. Don't get involved. But like, what is how is Jesus way of interacting here different from just that sort of quietism that's just like, just stay in your home and don't bother people too much? Like, what does the engagement look like? Does that make sense, Paul?
Absolutely. Yeah, because if we're not supposed to rebel violently, to stop what is oppressive, yeah.
Yeah.
What do we do, right? So
What do we
I
do?
would summarize from what I see, and we can talk about the particulars. I would summarize Jesus' recommend response as rebellious love.
Mm.
That's not too shocking. Oh, Jesus, recommending love, but rebellious love, like unusual love, surprising, and even to the point of what I would call shaming injustice, the kind of love that shames the injustice because it's exaggerating its errors. Right? You can look at Jesus on the cross as the ultimate symbol of, I love the poor. I rallied people to what God really cared about. I went after the ostracized. And as a result of that being so good to so many, now those in power want to kill me. And as he dies, it shows the world that the powers that be who don't care about you, but just want to preserve their power, will take out any threat.
Yeah.
And it's just this, what? It's you see him and you go, that guy who like cared about folks on the fringes, who wanted to make sure the poor weren't wiped out, but had a place where they were accepted and taken care of. And what, that guy that stood for treating people the way you would want to be treated, like as getting killed. How evil, right? Could the people be that orchestrated this? The power players that are just trying to preserve their privilege and position. So rebellious love, it doesn't kill the bad guy, but it exaggerates their errors. I mean, that's what's behind all those little kind of Roman soldier abuse recommendations that Jesus gives, like in the Sermon on the Mount, where it's, hey, a Roman soldier could force you to carry any of his stuff for a mile, right? So there was like a legal practice, like, hey, that's an appropriate level of Roman oppression according to Roman law. And yet Jesus says, hey, when they make you do that, he doesn't say, then go back to where they sleep and slit their throats in the night, just to make it clear.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah.
That was unfair oppression. He says, now look at them and say, hey man, I'll carry this for the next smile. I know you
you
can't
seem real tired and
force me to do this, but looks like you need some help.
Yeah.
And I want you to know that, like, if you had just asked in the first place, that'd be the way to do it. Okay. And I mean, I have the capacity for voluntary care and love, and you didn't have to be an a-hole about it.
Yeah.
And so it's one of these things of like, oh, I'm gonna love you in a
Yeah.
way that's just gonna kind of
Yeah.
surprise you,
Hmm.
annoy you.
Yeah.
I want to treat you like you're worthless, and you're going to respond like a loving, engaged,
Yeah.
wise human being who cares about others.
Mm.
Oh crap, that makes me look bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a kind of reforming love. It's that shaming injustice is meant to drive repentance
Right.
in
Yeah.
in the wrong.
Yeah. To say you can join us here. Like you, that's the goal, right? Of all of this stuff is not the humiliation or domination of the wicked person, but the repentance of the wicked person to say, hey, join us in practicing righteousness and justice, you know, act for what makes for peace, you know.
How do you do that today? Like, practically speaking, what does that kind of look like? If Jesus's kingdom is not of this world, as he says to Pilate, like, how do we live that out today? What does rebellious love look like in real time? Can you give us an example or two?
Yeah, for me, I mean, one of the privileges of my life is I get to run a private foundation that gives out money to the most effective ministries we can find around the world. So I always get to be kind of building my knowledge of who's doing what. So um, different Christian communities and how they're functioning. So when I think of this, I think of the rebellious love of an organization in India that when the government said everyone's just on lockdown and can't move, and they knew, wait a minute, we've got all sorts of day laborers that in a few days, if there's food to buy, like that food could start running low. They'll certainly run out of money. And so they said, okay, all of the normal training work that we do at our centers is switching. And we are now going to become a mass food cooking organization. And we are going to do deliveries. And even though we're not supposed to be mixing it up from neighborhood to neighborhood, oh, we are.
Mm-hmm.
We because we can't. One, if this thing kills us, we're not afraid to die.
Mm-hmm.
We don't live with that kind of fear. And then two, like if our neighbors are struggling, particularly the most vulnerable, yeah,
Yeah.
we know that's the heart of Jesus. And so when I see that kind of action, which can get you in trouble and get you pulled over and get you stopped, and do you have a permit for this, and you get in trouble, and it
Mm-hmm.
can lead to all these problems, and it's like, yeah, yeah, we're literally trying to help those 5,000 people in
Mm-hmm.
that village that none of you guys
Yeah.
really care about, in a culture where, in a caste system in
Yeah.
India, that can kind of wholesale dismiss people in the Dalit,
Yeah.
kind of the backward castes on the bottom of things as subhuman, and therefore who really cares what happens to them.
Yeah.
So in that kind of place where the powerful dismiss the
Mm-hmm.
the theologically written off in the Hindu mindset, yeah, you see Jesus's people
Yeah.
stepping up and saying like, I'm not going to go attack the government. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like beating up the police. I'm just going to keep loving these people, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if it puts me crosswise with the police, even if it means, I'm struck by a couple things about that, Paul. Um, One is it does entail, you said this earlier, it does entail a willingness to suffer and perhaps even die in order for me to practice love. So rather than a willingness to kill, a willingness to dominate others, I do think that Jesus seems to be inviting us into a willingness to suffer, which is obviously the cross is the ultimate picture of this, where he says, this is what it means to be a human who loves, is you suffer rather than dominate and kill. And it also then, I think once you are willing to suffer, then creativity can come because it's not like a set of rules, that organization in India, their situation changed quickly. They adapted quickly and said, well, I don't know what their prayer meetings were like. I don't know what their meetings were like where they decided to do this, but they just were like, well, I guess we're going to do this now. We're going to try this, we're just going to go for it, and so I think sometimes it's like each and every situation demands this kind of like adaptive, on the ground creativity, that I think the Spirit does provide if we're entering into it with, again, the willingness to say, I'm not going to love my own life unto death. I don't know. It sounds like it always sounds like such a radical call, but like, I mean, just if you read the Bible, it's kind of, you know what I mean? Like you read the Gospels, like it was really radical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's a really strong alternative tradition to the revolutionary messiah of a violent political takeover. There's that stream of it, and you can go read like there's a thing called the Psalms of Solomon. You can go read Psalm of Solomon 17, and it talks about like, Lord, send us the son of David, the coming king, so that he can purge Jerusalem of all these oppressors, and we'll have victory over everybody. And it's just this, give us, triumph over them all. And yet then there's this smaller tradition that is actually, it's mentioned in Daniel, in Jewish literature, Second Maccabees, and then spelled out for all of Fourth Maccabees, is a story of some folks who wanted to remain true to God when the political power over Jerusalem at the time in the 2nd century BC was pushing hard against them. Yeah. And the thing to do was just serve the Greek ruler that was running Jerusalem, who wanted to wipe out the practice of the law, the faithful worship of God. And the way to preserve power, so there's this high priest Onias, and he was like a faithful dude. And then a bunch of power hungry folks took him out of office, and they like bought their way into the high priesthood, and they were taking money from the temple and giving it to the Greek powers that be to preserve, and then Onias points this out, and he's like, this is not right. That like money was supposed to be pooled together to take care of the landless, and you're using it to bribe for position of political influence. And of course, what happened? He was killed for standing up for what was right. Yeah. But then that became celebrated as a path of like, he was a good guy. He was faithful to God. This was a guy who would pray every day for the welfare of all of the nation. Like, he didn't care just about him and his position. He lost his position, then he lost his life. And so that tradition gets spelled out, a long list of priests and regular people who stood what was right, even knowing that these Greek oppressors from the outside may kill them. And that's the path Jesus followed.
Yeah. Yeah. Jesus versus the Revolutionaries. There you have it.
Read the chapter. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, the book is What Jesus Meant. If you want to pick up a copy, Paul, I'm excited. What are we talking about next? Let me check. I'm going to give a little teaser for next week. We are talking about Jesus versus. So we've been, just to give everybody a little review here, we've been through Jesus versus the rabbis. We've been through Jesus versus the wealthy. We've talked about Jesus versus the separatists, and today the revolutionaries.
The temple.
Tomorrow, what's that?
The temple.
Yeah, the temple is next. Yeah, I was going to say next week we're going to talk about Jesus versus the temple. So the thing that strikes me is that the first four are all descriptions of groups of people, whereas the temple is the name of a building, obviously, but you're probably talking about a whole system there, eh?
Oh, this is like the spiritual industrial complex. This is the center of the power. Yeah. Everyone had to come here. Everything had to go through there. And so Jesus had to reckon with it. Okay. Well, join us next week. I think it's next week. We're going to talk about that next week.
Yep, I think so.
Just checking my schedule. Jesus versus actually next. Yeah, it's either next week or next time. So anyway, thanks, Paul.
Absolutely.